Hello and welcome to Strange Stories. It's great to have you here. We are all about sharing stories of near-death experiences from around the world in the hopes of bringing some light and inspiration to your day. Our daily videos offer a glimpse into what lies beyond this life, and we believe that they can help us all appreciate the gift of life a little bit more. If you enjoy our content, please consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell to stay up to date on all of our latest videos. Your support means the world to us and helps us continue to grow. And to our returning viewers, welcome back. We're thrilled to have you with us again. So go ahead, grab a cozy blanket, get comfy, and join us for today's incredible near-death experience story.
I teach English at a community college, and I believe one of the messages from the other side was to be of service to others. In many ways, I was a typical college student, a scholarship kid from a poor country town in Texas who was trying to rise above poverty and abuse, and materialism was a big part of my life, but I was also deeply depressed. You know when you come into the world with a lot of pain and abuse in your family, and you don't quite know how to work it out, and then you're thrown into this. And it was the 90s, this big mix of excessive drinking and drug abuse. And of course I experimented, but I felt this deep loneliness beginning to overtake me. And I started to have panic attacks, probably 3 months before I had the near-death experience where I would think about this body and dying. And I grew up in a religious household. I just couldn't fathom not being my body and not having this consciousness. And I had this idea that I would get my life together, get healthy, and I would run the Austin 10K. So as a way of getting rid of some of those panic attacks, I quit drinking so much and quit the drugs. And I was like a hardcore runner every day. So this race was a symbol of me getting my life together and everything going well. I had a massive head-on collision on the way to that race. Basically, we hit each other almost head-on. I broke my back, suffered spinal injuries, lost feeling in my leg, and had to wait 17 hours for spinal surgery. Fortunately, the other person was in a larger car and they were unharmed. They needed plastic surgery on their brows. I ended up connecting with a neurosurgeon who was off duty because one had not returned. In Austin, they were apparently understaffed. There are a lot of college students in that town who have accidents, so I waited without painkillers or anything strapped to this board, not knowing if I was going to walk. She eventually took me in for surgery, and the next thing I knew, I had stepped out of my body for quite some time because I recall seeing the body and almost laughing. I felt such joy because I knew the moment I lifted up out of my body that we would continue, that we would retain this consciousness. That consciousness seemed even clearer than when I was in that body. It appeared as if the body and mind are a limiter of consciousness and that outside of the body, there's a lot more consciousness and joy. The next thing I noticed were these enormous light beings. I had no idea about angels, Reiki, light work, or anything else. I was completely uninterested in spirituality, so seeing these massively intelligent beings astounded me. They were behind the neurosurgeons, and I had so many thoughts all at once, but one of them was, do the neurosurgeons realize they're there, and why are they here? And they immediately sent waves of light and energy into my spirit form to calm me down. I knew they were there to help, and they said something kind of playful, and angels can be playful. They said, watch this, and they shot this light through the backs of the surgeons' hands, lighting up my entire body. I just got the impression that they were directing the surgeons, and that even if the surgeons missed something, they would assist. They were literally there to assure me that I'd walk and run and have a good life. So I thought, okay, that's good to know. But then the monitor went blank, and I realized, oh, the body's dead now. I don't want to be seen watching as I leave. So I left the hospital and ran into my stepfather. My mother married when I was in college. She got remarried. When I saw him, my soul just started saying goodbye to everyone I'd ever met. I just sent love in the sense of, hey, have a good life, have a wonderful life, enjoy it, because I was happy as that spirit. The most shocking thing about death is that it was preferred to life in some ways, and a lot of people talk about that, but there was so much joy, freedom, and safety. I know I was supported in that realm, even if it took some time to get to that presence of God. It's difficult to explain, but I felt like there was a higher consciousness or love sending light through the entire thing. Through the angels, and as I left the hospital and went into the night sky, it was as if I transitioned really quickly. A tunnel is mentioned by many near-death experiencers, but I went far out into the stars, kind of like the cosmos, and I was just hanging out there and enjoying being in the stars when this light came closer and closer and said different things that were intense messages. The first was that love is all that matters and that we take with us. I'm going to go outside and play like a child, and so the next place I transitioned into was what people would call heaven, but to me, it felt like this beautiful holding space. The grass was very green, the sky was very blue, and the grass swayed back and forth, indicating that there was nothing dead and everything was alive. So you know how you look out in the winter at various times and notice a piece of grass that is a little brown on it? Each blade of grass sung with the purity of what it was, like pure and alive, and I thought, this is just a beautiful place. I felt very peaceful while being held in this light. But then my grandfather appeared, and he was the only person who was dead, and he was very loving, and I could trust him. So I'm glad he was there because there was this sense of understanding, and we talked with telepathy, much like the angels who sent that light. We didn't have to use our voices because our senses were very different. He almost seemed to glow with this light. He appeared to be around 35 years old, but I didn't recognize him at first. He looked like his most beautiful self, but it was his eyes and jaw that I recognized as my grandfather. He showed me a truck he'd given to our family, and it had rusted in our front yard with nothing happening to it. It had just been left to rot, and there in heaven was this beautiful truck, and he said, "Do you want to ride it?" I had heard the message to be like a little child, and I saw that he'd become 35, and I was 21 or 22 at the time of my near-death experience. So I was like, why don't I take the age that I knew him? And so I became this little child and got in the back of the truck, and he was just driving me through these beautiful pastures, and I felt so happy and at peace. And just like we're playing with consciousness, playing with form. But then he turned to me and he leaned out the window and he's like, "Do you want to go on?" And he pointed to something that kind of looked like the sun, but immediately I knew this was God. And I was like, yes. And I just took off because we would not want to see God. So I'm flying towards this light and just getting more and more excited. I felt people's prayers and I heard every word that they said. Like some people prayed because they didn't want my mom to lose a child. Whatever aunts had lost a daughter, and she was like, "Don't let anyone go through this. Don't let this happen." Other people prayed for me. My grandmother loved me and was praying for me, and my dad and mom were also praying. I just kind of blew through their prayers though, because I was like, God's up there. I don't care about you guys. I mean, as awful as that sounds, it was so much more exciting, to move towards God. And as I moved towards God, all when you grow up with emotional and physical abuse, your self-esteem, it really takes a beating. And what I felt was like, one, I was safe in that presence of God when I was loved just as I am, and so is everyone you know. So are the parents who are neglectful or abusive. So are you. Every single person is worthy of God's love. And I felt how amazing it felt. But I also just felt changed. Like it was as if all the darkness, anything that had, quote, been done to me or was horrible didn't exist anymore in that place. All that existed was love, and I'd never felt. I'd suffered from depression. There've been, like a lot of questioning throughout my life. And in the presence of God, I did not want to return. I was like, no thank you. No thank you. And the minute I started thinking about not returning, there was like this energetic wall that just came up, and I kind of hit it, and God was like, look down. And I say, God, it's just this creator divinity, whatever you want to call it, a light that was so incredibly loving and pure, and not me. It was outside of me. It was a force greater than me. And when I looked down, I saw this river and many souls walking along it. And some souls were covered with darkness, and some were open and filled with light, and Creator just said, hey, there are some people who live in fear, and this fear could be depression, it could be pain, it could be anything that causes them to look inward. Anger, it's just a block to me, basically. Block to God. Your mission is to go back and remind them to turn on their lights, to be open to that light of divinity, to let it flow into their life the way you're experiencing it with me right now. And I want you to teach. And I was like, oh, no, 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 no. That's where we're going to have an argument, God. I don't want to teach. I grew up poor. I'm definitely not going to go into that profession. No way. And it was clear that at that time, it was not spiritual teacher. It was teacher in schools, like helping in that way. And it was almost as if God laughed at me, like my soul was kind of crumpled up like this ball and hurled back into my body. And then I was there in my body.